Hello, this is John. Welcome to the NCGA Valent Ag Weather Outlook for April 16th, 2016. I remember last week, if you listened to the briefing, I talked about it being a transition week, starting off on the cool side, but ending up on the warm side, and that was going to usher in a new, more significant pattern this spring. Now let's take a look and see how that turned out. But before I do that, let's look at precipitation over the last 7 days. Very quiet over most regions, with the exception of southern parts of Illinois, Indiana, parts of Ohio. And then look at this streak here through Michigan. More snow in that region. Matter of fact, this was in the pool of that cool air, upper air aloft, and this was in the form of snow. But for the most part, it was very quiet over the core regions of the Midwest last week. I'm still talking about snow, and I'm in mid-April here. It's not staying on the ground, but we're still getting snow. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed here, but I think this is probably the last time I'm going to be talking about snow this season. Famous last words, right? But look at this. This is that area in green, and that's 4 to 6 inches of snow, so we're still getting significant snow last week over the Great Lakes and parts of the northeast U.S. It's melted very quick. There's very little on the ground, if any. And with the pattern we're in, I really do think we're not going to be talking about snow anymore, with maybe just a rare exception this season. So here's the pattern that we had. We've had this for a while now, this cool air that has dipped over the Great Lakes, the eastern Corn Belt, the northeast U.S., and very warm air is indicated in the yellow and red out to the west. That's been that persistent type pattern that has kept temperatures and soil temperatures in check. It's really slowed down the northward progression of warming soils. But I mentioned last week that that was going to change, and that's what I'll be talking about in this briefing. So if I look at the polar source region now, what I see are warm anomalies. These are the areas in red have now settled in. It's pushed in over a large part of the Corn Belt. And when I look for sources of cold air, I see it shrinking. I see it very much confined. So if I looked at one image, I would say it's looking positive for some warming. So when I look at the jet stream this week, what I find is the jet stream pushing to the north. Look at that, no more blue, which is indicating the jet stream's further south than normal. So when I look at temperatures associated with this, what I find are above normal temperatures just about over the entire U.S. Corn Belt. And some of the areas that have really struggled getting some decent spring weather, Minnesota and Wisconsin, they're in the core of above normal temperatures, as much as 10 degrees above normal this week. Now, as far as precipitation goes this week, it looks like for the most part a fairly quiet week. Some light precipitation here and there, but the area that needs some rain is the far western Corn Belt. Parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, parts of Nebraska, parts of South Dakota, and especially North Dakota. And we're pulling in some moisture from the Gulf, some really deep moisture, pulling it well to the north. So hopefully we'll get some rain in this area right here, and that's what's needed at this time in that region. Now let's look a little bit further out, 6 to 10 days. Look at this. The entire nation warm. So we're looking at the end of April, from now till the end of April, and even looking a little bit further into early May, what we see are above normal temperatures. I call this a strong confidence signal. Models have been showing this for a while, so I think there's a good confidence now that we're looking at a 15-day stretch of above normal temperatures to some degree over just about the entire U.S. Corn Belt. Okay, so again, high confidence for that. Now let's look at precipitation. This is this week. I would call this a high confidence forecast. Below normal precipitation over the eastern Corn Belt, and then there's that axis, very narrow, but it could fall in an area where we need some additional precipitation. On week 2, look at this, not much change. Week 2 looks like the eastern Corn Belt is going to be dry, so I think we're looking at Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, most likely for 2 weeks of below normal precipitation and above normal temperatures, really going to dry out some soils in that region. Now over the west, this is positive for some second week in a chance of some additional rainfall over areas that have been dry. So we'll see how that works out on week 2, but that could be 2 weeks at least of a chance of rain over North and South Dakota and Nebraska that could use some additional precipitation. Now the 50-degree temperature line has been working up on the backside of that cool air. You can see now it extends as far north as parts of Nebraska, southern Iowa, southern Illinois, and that's going to continue to work fairly quick to the north. So when we look at a week ago, you can see how the upper pattern, it really was affecting soil temperatures. And here's a good example of how the air, the upper jet stream, and that's why I focus on that, it's aligned right with that dip in the jet stream, started pushing up in this region. And then I said last week in my briefing that this region would be pushing up. And if we look at it, we can see at the current time that is what has occurred. We've had a very significant warming of soils, and that looks like as we go forward, it is going to continue with soils continuing to either maintain the degree of warming they've had or even work a little bit further to the north. Now, if we want to look at soil moisture change, here we go. And I wanted to start out with this one here, actually. This is sort of important. What I like to do is, as we get out of winter into early spring, I like to see a little bit of surplus of moisture. And that would be the lightest shade of green here on this crop moisture index. So this is indicating to me, and I might get some emails back on disagreement with this, but the eastern corn belt with not so much the Great Lakes region, but the Illinois, Indiana, Ohio is in pretty good shape exiting winter and going into spring with soil moisture. So this region could probably use maybe a week or so dry weather. Now, I don't want to get too far down. This is the region that could use some additional precipitation. So when we look at soil moisture change this week, this is actually pretty good where we expect soils to increase the soil moisture: Nebraska, South Dakota, and parts of North Dakota. So overall, pretty good. Now, I don't want to get too dry. We're going to 2 weeks now in the eastern corn belt. I don't want to start to get too far down. I always get a little nervous about drying out too much. But right now, I think our overall pattern is positive for that increase of soil moisture. So here's your takeaway points. Heavy rain far west. We could get 2 to 4 inches of rain in limited areas in the far western corn belt. Below normal rain elsewhere, probably for 2 weeks. Temperature trend, warmer than normal temperatures until further notice, and that's going to be warming both air temperatures and soil temperatures. Have a great week. It looks like a good week to get outside and get all of our activity continuing without any significant impact with weather. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me. Hope you have a great week.